Hello and welcome back again to That Tracks F1 podcast. Thanks for joining me, your host Jodie. I'm so happy to have you here for this, our review of the Austrian Grand Prix at the Red Bull Ring. So did we all enjoy this weekend's racing? What did we think to everything that happened? How are you feeling about the controversial pole lap? We'll be talking about that, all of the events of the race, my predictions for this weekend, and lots of other things besides. But before we get into all of that, could I please ask you, would you please subscribe, give us a like, give us a follow on social media? The links to our socials are in the show notes. I'd really appreciate a message, a comment, a like, a follow, a subscribe, a review. Anything that you've got time for out of the goodness of your heart would be massively appreciated. I'm a completely independent podcaster. I'm new to podcasting, and these sort of things for me mean the absolute world to know that somebody out there is listening and that you care enough just to do a little thing like that for me. It'll take you a couple of seconds, but for me, it'll massively lift my spirits for weeks. So I'd really love it if you did one of those little things for me, guys. Thank you so much. But now, let's talk about the race weekend. So when it came to free practice 1, this was another session where some of the teams let their reserve drivers have a little go. And I was pleased to see that Luke Browning finally got his drive. He was in for Carlos. We had Hirakawa in for Ocon, Bogdanovic in for Leclerc, Paul Aaaaaand in for Bortoletto, Jack Crawford was in for Stroll, and interestingly, he actually went faster than Fernando Alonso in free practice 1, so that was pretty impressive. FP1 was quite busy, but not very busy for Lando Norris, as yet again, hydraulic leak, yet again an issue with the car, had him packed up in the garage for the first 45 minutes of the session. He really just doesn't get any luck, does he? Mercedes have actually discovered a fix for the battery issues that have been plaguing both them and their customer teams. And Oscar Piastri at McLaren and Alex Albon at Williams have now got the new improved battery fitted. But unfortunately for Carlos and Lando, because they are on their last battery, they've been unable to fit that for them because it would trigger a 10-place grid penalty due to the fact that they have no more battery allowance left. So that's also going to play into Lando's season at some point, I would suspect. During the session, Hadjar was complaining about hydraulics issues. Max Verstappen had issues and was stopped in the pit lane. He said every time he released the clutch, he got anti-stall, so again, hydraulics issues. Hirakawa managed to miss his pit box and clobber one of his pit crew. Don't know if you've seen the footage, but fortunately the pit crew member could see what was about to happen and jumped out of the way and I think minimised his injuries, but it could have been quite nasty. There was lockups galore, particularly at turn 3. Lewis had a lockup. And even towards the end of the session, Hadjar was still complaining that the balance of the car was a mess. And then 1 minute from the end of the session, Perez was stopped on track and that brought out the red flag. End of session. In FP2, Bottas was complaining there's something in the cockpit banging on his elbow. Perez was stopped out on track again. 9 minutes in, that brought out the virtual safety car. Max was complaining about his seat position and had to have the seat changed. It was just a really odd set of free practice sessions where everybody just seemed to be having lots and lots of issues and problems. About halfway through the session, turn 3 claimed Lando as well, who spun and went backwards into the corner, bumping over the curb. And again, about halfway through the session, Bottas was out because his car was bottoming out and catching on fire. Me having picked Cadillac as my hit the mark this weekend, looking at free practice, it was not a good choice. Hadjar, it was another driver, had a big snap at 3 and was complaining about the car. Verstappen saying there was a drop in the RPM of the power unit in the middle of turn 3. And then the session ended with Norris coming in and being told to cool the brakes, to which he replied, well, yes, my brakes have been on fire for the last 5 laps. So really messy sessions for all drivers, really. In free practice 3, Perez was first out and had a bit of a lock-up. Bottas wasn't out as his front right brake was being worked on in the garage, and they really have had a lot of trouble at Cadillac, haven't they, with keeping the brakes cool. About a third of the way into the session, Lando Norris sets a really blistering time and goes top, and then mentions that he's now got a broken mirror. I'm beginning to wonder if there's actually any part on Lando's car at this point that hasn't suffered a failure or a brake. About halfway through the session, Antonelli and Russell were definitely the fastest out there, and they were setting the fastest times. But however, when we went on to the soft tyre runs further into the session, Antonelli really didn't show any improvement. Verstappen again was on the radio, well, trying to be on the radio, saying that he had constant issues with his radio with static noise in his ear. Antonelli definitely looked more comfortable than Russell throughout this session, but with about 2 minutes to go in free practice 3, Russell suddenly found the sweet spot and conquered the understeer he'd had all 3 sessions and went fastest. So in free practice 1, Antonelli went fastest with Russell in 2nd and Piastri in 3rd. In free practice 2, again, it was Antonelli fastest, and this time Piastri in 2nd and Lando in 3rd. And in free practice 3, Russell was actually fastest with Antonelli 2nd and Lewis Hamilton was 3rd. So I think we were seeing a bit of a theme over the free practice sessions of the Mercedes being quite dominant again. The McLaren's quite well up there and the Ferrari's there or thereabouts. So when it came to qualifying, well, this was quite contentious, wasn't it, in the end? I don't think I've seen anything that quite divided opinion and brought out discussion about yellow flags as much as this qualifying session. Beginning with Quali 1, there was not really an awful lot going on in Quali 1. It was a fairly steady session, and the 6 that we lost were Stroll, who finished 22nd, Alonso finished 21st, Bottas finished 20th, Perez finished 19th, Albon finished 18th, and Sainz finished 17th. So we basically lost the Aston Martins, the Cadillacs, and the Williams again. And Quali 1 finished with Antonelli topping the times, Norris a respectable 2nd, and Hamilton in 3rd. Quali 2 was a little bit more interesting as Verstappen, as we came towards the end of the session, was sitting in 10th place. But the unfortunate thing about that was there were plenty of other drivers that had the potential to cross the line and push Verstappen into the relegation zone. So when we had 20 seconds to go, there he was sat in 10th. And then we had Behrman on a decent lap. And as he crossed the line, he went 11th. So Max was safe. But then we had Bortoletto on a bit of a flyer. He crosses the line and goes 11th, so Max is safe again. But then we had Gasly, and we all know how good Gasly's been this year. So I was really, really expecting to see Max push down to 11th when Gasly crossed the line. But Gasly actually ended up 11th as well. By 4/1000ths of a second, Verstappen was through to Quali 3. So he was very, very lucky there. So the drivers we lost in Quali 2 were Franco Colapinto, who finished 16th, Esteban Ocon finished 15th, Nico Hülkenberg in 14th, Ollie Behrman 13th, Gabriel Bortoletto 12th, Pierre Gasly in 11th, and that took us to the Quali 3 session. So the drivers came out in Quali 3 and set some banker laps, and as the timer ticked down, with about 7 minutes to go, Norris posted a really, really good lap and took provisional pole. But then along came Max, who was a full half-second faster than Norris and poached pole, with Piastri in 2nd. 6 minutes to go, Antonelli took the fastest time, and with Russell in 2nd. And at this point, there was actually 6/1000ths of a second separating the 1st to 3rd. But then, of course, as we all know, it all really hotted up in the last 30 seconds. So with 30 seconds to go, Hamilton was on an absolute hot one and takes pole by just 6/1000ths of a second, and then it was on. The battle for pole was absolutely on. Leclerc crosses the line and takes provisional pole, and that leaves just Norris, Verstappen and Piastri left to cross the line with the timer at 0. Norris doesn't really improve. He ends up finishing 6th and Piastri 7th. But along comes Verstappen, who looks like he's absolutely on a flyer and perfectly positioned to threaten Leclerc's pole lap. And of course, at this point, we've got Hamilton sitting in 2nd, so we are looking at a Ferrari 1-2 in qualifying. And then along comes Verstappen, who unfortunately at turn 9 crashes into the wall. Now, this is where the controversy comes in. This brings out a yellow flag. Antonelli is told by Bono that it is a double-waved yellow, and Antonelli backs off. For Russell, it is a single-waved yellow. I don't know whether the mistake lay with Antonelli or it laid with Bono, but that was a mistake. It was not a double-waved yellow. It was a single-waved yellow. And Russell makes it clear to his pit crew that he does actually lift going into the corner. But when he crosses the line, he's still set a faster time and takes pole. And then, of course, there's some confusion as to whether he will actually take pole because the pole time was set under a yellow. And I've seen a lot of criticism of George for this, of the FIA for this, of the stewards. Like, how can you possibly cross the line under yellows and take pole? That's just not on. And the reason is, if it's a single yellow flag that's flown by the marshals, or on a light board and on the dash of the driver's car, a single yellow is a steady yellow light. And on the light board, it's a steady yellow light, and you'll see a marshal waving a yellow flag. When it's double waved yellows, you will obviously see a marshal with 2 yellow flags, your yellow light board will flash, and your yellow light on the dash of the car will also flash. And it's been proven that in George's case, it was a single waved yellow. And a single waved yellow, the rules are you lift, you slow, and you prepare to change direction, and you cannot overtake because there is a hazard beside or partly on the track, which at this point there was. Verstappen's car had crashed. It was into the tyre wall. It was a hazard that was beside the track. So the single waved yellow was the correct call. Now, a double waved yellow means that the hazard is wholly or partly blocking the track, and or marshals are on or beside the track, which they were not at that point. And at that point, you have to reduce your speed significantly, not overtake, and prepare to stop. So actually, the reason why George's lap did not get deleted and he got to keep pole was that what he did was within the rules. The telemetry showed he lifted into the corner. He played exactly to the rules. And I think more should have been made of this on the TV coverage so that more people understood the difference between a waved yellow and a double waved yellow and what they mean. Because I see a lot of people quite rightly saying, how can it not be double wave yellow because Verstappen's crashed into the tyre wall? But that's the point. He's well out of the way of the track. He's not a hazard, but he's not a double waved yellow hazard. There was no marshal trackside with him. He wasn't on the actual racetrack blocking the track. So a single waved yellow was the most appropriate course of action. So whether you like George or not, whether you liked what happened, it does seem counterintuitive that you can post a pole time under a waved yellow, but it was actually inside of the rules. So yes, there was George. George took pole. Now, I don't know how you found the race on race day. I found the first part of the race, probably the first quarter to a third, to be absolutely brilliant and a great, enjoyable watch. So much going on. I mean, Russell's away. As soon as the lights are out, Russell's gone. Antonelli is absolutely frantic to try and catch up, and you can see him doing that, making those kind of like young, hot-headed rookie mistakes again. As he's running wide constantly, he ends up being warned because he's exceeded track limits twice. He has to give a place back when he does it the third time. But yeah, Russell's out of there with Hamilton in hot pursuit. But Antonelli, all over the place, just all over the place. Rather than taking the time to calm down and see how he can best deal with the situation, he's just off like a rocket. A little bit further down the field, Lando Norris tries to get past Verstappen and ends up semi-boxed in and actually gets overtaken himself by Piastri. Verstappen, in the meantime, has a real ding-dong with Hamilton. It's some great racing to watch, actually. We really enjoyed this whole battle between Verstappen and Hamilton. It was near the knuckle that it really did push to the limits, but it was clean racing and really enjoyable to watch. I don't think Max was very happy. He had some complaints about the way that Lewis was racing him, but it wasn't upheld, and I certainly couldn't see. It was aggressive racing, but it wasn't anything that was outside of the rules. And Hamilton definitely comes out on top of that fight and then indeed goes after Leclerc and takes second place. As I say, we really enjoyed the opening few laps of the race. We found them really enjoyable, lots and lots going on, lots that was very entertaining, some really great racing, but I just felt like the race kind of ran out of steam a little bit. The second 2/3 of the race were just a little bit lackluster, especially compared to that great start and compared to some of the races we've had lately. I think Barcelona had a little bit of a lull in the middle of the race, but then it came good again at the end. But I just felt this race kind of petered out. There was 1 or 2 battles going on, but nothing really that was greatly interesting. It certainly not my favourite race of the year so far. But in those early laps where everything was happening, it really, really was happening. Poor old Bottas retires on lap 2, which was just awful. And then that was made immediately worse for Cadillac when Perez retires on lap 4. And again, it's the overheating brakes. Again, it's something that Cadillac seems to be really, really struggling to get on top of. Liam Lawson's also complaining that his car's basically on fire, which said it quite casually, but I would have thought that was quite worrying. That basically, yes, my car's on fire, the cockpit's full of smoke. So I kind of anticipated an early retirement for Liam, but somehow he managed to get to the end of the race. So by the time we got to lap 8, Antonelli was past Leclerc. Hamilton pits on lap 13, then Leclerc, who rejoins in 11th. Lap 19, Verstappen goes into the pits and rejoins in 6th behind Hamilton. Russell comes in the next lap, back out in 3rd. Piastri then pits. Norris stays out initially. I think they were going to try for 2 different strategies with the 2 drivers, but he said the car, he was getting everything out of the car at this point and had no power. So he pitted pretty soon after Piastri as well. So this all then shut down so that Russell was in 2nd and Antonelli in 1st, but of course Antonelli still needed to stop. On lap 22, Verstappen and Hamilton have another scrap, and Verstappen gets past Hamilton to take 3rd. Now, on lap 24, some yellows appear, and that's because Carlos Sainz has stopped on the main straight, and this turned out that this was another retirement, and this time for an electrical issue. And whilst this was happening, Antonelli had actually done his pit stop. But then, of course, Sainz brought out the VSC. So basically, Antonelli missed out on a freebie pit stop there, which he must have been absolutely furious about. That puts Antonelli down into 5th. There's then a second stop for Hamilton, who returns to the track in 7th. Antonelli gets past Leclerc for 3rd. Verstappen then starts catching Russell. Piastri gets past Leclerc for 4th. Hamilton past Leclerc for 5th. Leclerc then pits. Verstappen is then catching Russell. He's really catching up on him slowly but surely. Another round of pit stops, Russell ends up in 3rd, and on lap 44, Verstappen pits and comes out in 3rd. So it ends up at this point as Antonelli, Russell and Verstappen. Antonelli pits again, and while that's happening, Leclerc loses his 6th place to Lando Norris. Really, all of the action happened early in the race, but there wasn't a great deal of wheel-to-wheel action or really any kind of interesting undercuts or strategies at play. So the race ended with Russell as the winner, Verstappen a very respectable 2nd, Antonelli in 3rd, Piastri in 4th, Hamilton 5th, Hadjar 6th, Norris finishing 7th, Leclerc finishing 8th, and then Lawson and Lindblad taking 9th and 10th. So just having a little recap and a quick look at the teams. Cadillac, as we know, absolutely tragic weekend for Cadillac. 2 DNFs, 1 on lap 2, 1 on lap 4. There's nothing more to say for Cadillac. I think that's probably their worst showing yet. That really is absolutely terrible. Considering they brought some upgrades this weekend and were pretty hopeful. And I picked them as we'll get to that. We'll get to the predictions. But let's just say, it's not looking good. Aston Martin, it was more of the usual. Lance Stroll with a DNF. Alonso finished, but was 3 laps down. Then we had Audi. Now, Audi's a bit of a weird one, isn't it? Because if you look at it in terms of where the team is placed, it doesn't look great. But again, Bortoleto 11th, Hülkenberg 12th. They are finishing consistently in those 11th and 12th places, and it's a real shame because they're just outside the points. And it's so really their point score as a team doesn't really reflect how well they are doing this season, and that's a real shame. Then we have Williams, Sainz, as you know, with a DNF. Albon finished 17th and 2 whole laps down, so there's very little to celebrate there. Another bad weekend for Williams. It's a real shame. Haas, again, have stayed in that completely off the boil. Great start to the season in the opening rounds, basically fallen off a cliff. Ocon finished 16th and 2 laps down. Behrman finished 14th and a lap down. And if Behrman can't do any better than 14th and a lap down, no disrespect to Esteban, who's a very capable driver, but we know how on fire Ollie Behrman was at the beginning of the year. There's something not right going on at Haas with that car. If Behrman can only wring 14th out of it. Then we have the Alpines, and what a bizarre weekend for the Alpines. Considering their recent form and how competitive they have been, where they really have held on to that position as best of the rest. Colapinto 15th and a lap down, Gasly 13th and a lap down. Now, we know up to recent times, Colapinto has not been quite up to the standard, not finishing in quite such a position as Gasly has done. He's finished a little bit further down. So in isolation, Colapinto finished in 15th. Doesn't look all that unusual if we were looking at this at the beginning of the season. But obviously, the last few times out, Colapinto's had an absolute belter of a race and has scored points. And then you look and realise that Gasly's in 13th. So something was not right there this weekend, because if Gasly can't get that car any further up than 13th, then that tells you all you need to know. Racing Bulls. Well, what an absolutely belting weekend for the Racing Bulls boys again. 4th race in the race. It's 3rd or 4th race now in the row where there's double points. And again, Lawson finished 9th, a lap down, and Lindblad 10th, a lap down. But what an absolutely solid performance from them both. I think there was a little bit of hoo-ha between the drivers, actually, where with Lawson saying basically my car's on fire, he was told to to just back off a little bit and call the brakes. And he says, the team said to him that he was under no threat from Lindblad behind, that Lindblad would be instructed to give him the space he needed to cool the car. Lindblad says he received no such instruction and decided to have a little bit of a pop at Liam, and I believe at one point got past him, but then got undercut again on the pit stops. But I think Liam felt a little bit aggrieved by that. Lindblad's attitude was, nobody told me I couldn't, so I did, and it was great, and I had brilliant fun, thank you very much. So we'll have to see how that relationship continues to unfold. Red Bull, obviously, Verstappen finished second, started fifth, finished second, and only 1.6 seconds behind Russell. I'm not surprised he won Driver of the Day. I do think today he was probably the best driver out there. He certainly got the most out of the machinery he had and was definitely very aggressive and just doing max things, really. So, yeah, great. Absolutely brilliant drive from Verstappen. Hadjar, no shoddy showing either. Finished a very respectable 6th, 30 seconds down. But again, not completely tailed off. Not miles behind Verstappen. And a good, solid, sensible race. McLarens, I'm really confused by the McLarens this weekend. Very interesting comment by Lando over the weekend that he feels that the team is about 3 months behind in the developmental curve, which is very concerning. A bit of a tale of two halves, really. Norris fits and starts doing quite well in free practice, setting some very respectable times early on in qualifying, but just never really basically said that, that's all the pace I've got in the car, and in the end, he finished 7th and 31 seconds down. Quite anonymous, really. Not really anything going on for the entire race. Piastri, on the other hand, 4th, 21 seconds behind, admittedly. But I think things fell a little better for Oscar, and I think that he was really pulling some great moves out there today as well. So I felt a little bit like Oscar's finally back in that groove I keep talking about that I wanted Oscar to find. Yes, he does enjoy this track. No, he didn't have the best car underneath him today, but I think he did an awful lot with what he had, so well done, Oscar. Ferrari, Leclerc 8th and 45 seconds down, Hamilton 5th and 26 seconds behind. Disappointing, really, when you look at where they qualified and the promise of the upgrades they were bringing this weekend. I expected to see a lot from the Ferraris. I expected at the very least for one of them to be on the podium. And again, the cards just didn't fall right for them this weekend at all. Leclerc looked a bit better this weekend. I could make the obvious statement that he didn't crash. He didn't. But 8th is not really what we'd be expecting to see from Charles. Really, we're hoping for better than 5th for Hamilton. Just not a step in the right direction, not building on what they put in place last weekend like I thought they would. So that's a real shame. But we'll see. We'll see what Silverstone brings for them. And obviously then we've got the Mercedes. Antonelli finishing 3rd, 1.9 seconds behind, and Russell, of course, taking the win. I mean, really, you can't fault Russell's drive today. He just basically disappeared, didn't he? Off he went. He was doing some mad calculating in the car at one point, trying to figure out how to work the strategy the best way that he could, because he was trying to figure out everybody else's around him strategy as well, in order to keep himself in first. He certainly did the best he could, got pole, took the win. Russell is now 2nd again in the Drivers' Championship and only 40 points behind Kimi. So that's definitely going to lift George right up. 40 is still a good-sized gap, but it's not doable. We saw last year that kind of gap at this point of the season is not doable. So I would imagine that's buoyed him right up. Antonelli, 2nd race on the trot where it's not quite come together for him quite the way he would want. And I think you do see that little bit of frustration for him. Antonelli's one at the minute, and it's that little bit of immaturity, isn't it? When he gets pole, he has a great weekend because he's got pole. He's got that momentum, and he goes out there. And I always feel like if Kimi's on pole, then barring any kind of reliability issues, Kimi's going to win, most likely. But if Kimi doesn't get pole, we saw him in the early stages of the race today, just really, really over-aggressive and making mistakes. So that's his little Achilles heel, I think, is to learn to just stacker down and calmly go about the job a little bit more, with a little bit more thought, and not be so quick to rush into everything. Just take your time, have a little bit of patience, and see where you can make those places back. Not that by any means that 3rd is something to be sniffed at. It's not the end of the world for him. But if this keeps happening, if he keeps finishing 3rd and Russell keeps winning, that lead that he had quite comfortably will soon get eaten away. Right, okay, now for the really depressing part for me, we're going to have a little look at my predictions. So, beginning with my qualifying predictions, and I got one right. 1 out of 5. Go me. I predicted in 5th place on the grid would be Verstappen, and it was indeed Verstappen. He qualified 5th. I had Norris qualifying in 4th, and it was in fact Antonelli. I had Russell qualifying 3rd, and it was Hamilton. I had Hamilton qualifying 2nd, but it was the other Ferrari of Leclerc. And I had Antonelli for pole, and it was the other Mercedes of Russell. So a rather paltry 1 out of 5 there. So how did I do in the race? Well, I got one right. Just one. I predicted Leclerc to finish 5th, and it was the wrong Ferrari because it was Hamilton that finished 5th. I predicted Russell to finish 4th, which was miles out, and it was in fact Piastri. I predicted Antonelli to finish 3rd, and Antonelli did indeed finish 3rd. And I predicted Norris to take 2nd, and it was Verstappen. Predicted Hamilton for the win, and it was Russell. So 1 out of 5 in qualifying, and 1 out of 5 in the race. Now, hit the mark. Oh my goodness. I've made a few notes here, and next to my hit the mark, I've just written the words, oh dear. And that's because I picked, well, actually, to be fair, I initially picked Norris for my hit the mark because I really did think that he would go extremely well this weekend, loving this track like he does. And then I changed my mind, not because I didn't think Norris would do well, although he didn't, ironically. I decided that picking Norris, on some level somewhere, I must have decided that picking Norris was not a poor enough choice for this weekend, and I could go one better. So I picked Cadillac for my hit the mark this week. I thought that both cars would, in fact, I predicted, I said it with my chest, I predicted with confidence they would have a great race. Both cars, both Bottas and Perez, would finish the race, and that they would very possibly even get their first point. But what actually happened was that Bottas went out on lap 2 and Perez retired on lap 4. So it couldn't be any worse. I think thus far this season, that is my worst hit the mark prediction to date. So I can only apologise, Cadillac, for cursing you with the most appalling luck this weekend by drawing attention to you and saying how fantastically you were going to do, and you had an absolute disaster class. Sorry, Cadillac. Now, when it comes to the pull over and park, I actually did say when I picked this team for pull over and park that the last time I picked this team for pull over and park, they went on to do quite well. And if that worked again, that fans of this team should all be very grateful to me. So I do feel, Red Bull fans, that you all do owe me a little bit of something here, because I did actually pick Red Bull for pull over and park. I didn't think they were going to do absolutely terribly. I just felt that they were still quite behind Ferrari and Mercedes when it came to generating the downforce. I was worried about their tyres overheating and that thermal degradation, and the fact that the car was still a little on the heavy side. But all credit to them. This prediction was pretty much wrong. Isaac had a decent race, and as for Max, well, he nearly up and won it, didn't he? Certainly had a heck of an afternoon going from 5th to 2nd. So yeah, I definitely, well, obviously I can't even claim a scrap or a crumb of hope from my hit the mark this week. That was an utter, unmitigated disaster. My pull over and park was also wrong because, well, Red Bull had a pretty solid afternoon, didn't they? Particularly with Max. So yeah, that was generally pretty much a disaster on the predictions front this week. So I guess we'll have to see just how well I can excel myself when it comes to the British Grand Prix and the predictions I do there. So moving on from that little bit of semi-negativity from my predictions being not exactly great, I am going to finish up on a little note of positivity. Those of you that listen to me regularly know that I like to batter somebody with a flattering ram over the weekend. And when I say somebody, it's not necessarily a driver. It's not necessarily even a person. Sometimes it's a team. Sometimes it's something not really related to the team or the driver. It can be the audience. It could be, it's just something that stands out that I just think that was kind of a little thing, but that was really, really either kind or interesting or selfless or nice. Just something that makes you stop for a moment and go, oh, wow. And this week I am awarding the flattering ram to Charles Leclerc. And it was indeed just a little thing that he did, but it's been noted, and it's been noted by a few people. And I think it speaks volumes about his character, and I think it was very nice. As you all know, It was extraordinarily hot in Austria this weekend. The Red Bull Ring was very, very toasty. Lots of direct sunlight. As I said in my preview, Europe is suffering under this heat wave at the moment, and it's no joke. It's not been great. So when all the drivers were lined up to listen to the national anthem as they do, a number of them had umbrellas to keep themselves in the shade. Not all of them, but some of them did. And as the camera panned along, as ever, when they have the national anthem, they have children, don't they, that stand in front of the drivers and sometimes sing along, sometimes quite hilariously. And as usual, they had rows of children in front of the drivers singing along with the national anthem. And the sun's beating down on them, and they are just young children. And as the camera panned along, you could see Charles Leclerc angling his umbrella so that he could share his shade with the little boy or girl that was stood in front of him. And I just thought that speaks volumes about his character, that at a time when all of a driver's concentration is on the race to come, when they are thinking about a million things at once, when you've got those inevitable nerves that come before a race, and it's so easy to be very inside your own head, and not in a nasty way when I say don't think, you're not thinking about anybody else, but you have to be fully focused in those moments before a race. I actually thought that was a really nice gesture of Charles, to just lean his umbrella forward in that baking heat to just try and keep some of the sun off. I don't know if it was a boy or a girl because you couldn't tell by the camera angle, but off of the child in front of him. And I just thought it's a small thing, but I felt that was very, very sweet. So yeah, this week's flattering ram is yours, Charles Leclerc. I thought that was really sweet. So that brings my review of the Austrian Grand Prix to an end. It's been quite an exciting weekend in places. Like I say, I don't think this one will go down as my favourite race of the season, but I think we learned a lot about the upgrades and where a lot of the teams are. And I think that it's definitely going to hot up this Drivers' Championship quite a lot. Russell's very much back in the game again. Kimi's a little on the back foot at the moment, but scrapping away. You can't discount the Ferraris, particularly Lewis, and it looks like Max has decided he's going to join the party, and I'm here for all of that. A four-way fight for the championship for me is the stuff that dreams are made of. Sign me up. And if you can throw a couple of McLarens in that mix as well, oh, heaven on a plate. So, this coming weekend, it is the British Grand Prix. We have no break this weekend. We're going to roll straight into the British Grand Prix, which I absolutely love. And as a super bonus, or at least I think it's a super bonus because I know they divide opinion, but I love them. It is a sprint weekend, so you are getting more bang for your buck this weekend, ladies and gentlemen, because sprint. And as we know, the British Grand Prix always brings a little bit something different. It is an iconic track. There's going to be lots of support there for George this weekend, and for Lando, obviously, it's their home Grand Prix. It's Ollie Behrman's home Grand Prix. It's kinda Alex Albon's home Grand Prix. We know he races under the Thai flag. Obviously, Lewis's home Grand Prix. So we're hoping for their sake for them all to go well there. I don't think since Silverstone last year a driver has won their home Grand Prix. So I guess we'll have to see if a British driver can seal it this weekend. According to early calculations, it's going to be a stormy and wet race. And I think it's a wet race with these new regs is long overdue, isn't it? You can never really predict the weather at Silverstone. I've been to the Grand Prix at Silverstone. I've also marshalled the Grand Prix at Silverstone one year, and it was wet and it was foggy and it was not fun. But yeah, I absolutely love the British Grand Prix. I think the track is absolutely iconic and I'm really, really looking forward to it. And like I say, for me, bonus, it's a sprint weekend. So what do you all think? Who do you think is going to triumph in Silverstone? Will it be a home victory for George? Will he be on a roll now? Will Lando be able to get on that podium? Who knows? Or will Ferrari come bombing through? Will we see Lewis win a British Grand Prix yet again? I guess we'll have to wait and see. So not long, guys. Just a few days to get through. Take it easy and be kind to yourself. Don't work too hard. And don't forget the cheesy tagline. That Tracks F1 podcast. Track the action. Join the fun. Bye.